Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/AskReddit. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. People who like to explore abandoned buildings. What was the biggest fuck this, I'm out moment you had while exploring? Found what looked like the remains of a pig, and it was wearing lingerie. Don't talk about my mother like that. Oh kakakakak, but this is a crazy story, and maybe it would explain what you found. In my undergrad, I took a forensic anthropology class and our professor, later my graduate supervisor, told us a story of how they would bury pigs dressed in women's clothing and underwear to study how the clothing breaks down during decomp. After one such study, they just left the pigs in place and I guess forgot about them? I dunno. Anyways, the story goes that the location they used was just outside the city, and was due to be developed into a shopping center. Needless to say, the developers found the pigs, said WTF, and called the police. Luckily, my prof is also the forensic anthropologist for the police, and was able to explain things to them pretty quickly. Weird day for the contractors, I guess. Several years ago, a man was murdered in the city I was working in, and parts of his body were turning up at various locations. I think his hand and foot had been found and a week had passed. I'm an architectural designer, and I was surveying an abandoned chapel that was slated to be renovated into condos. It was apparent that homeless people had been squatting in the chapel, but I wasn't sure how recently they had been there. When I went into the basement though, it was clear someone was either there or had just left based on the smell. There were no lights due to the power being cut, and I didn't stick around long enough to see if anyone was currently occupying the space. 2 days later, someone reported that they found the torso and head of the murdered man in the building attached to the chapel. I had been too freaked out by the smell in the basement to continue on to the attached building. But I'm almost certain I would have been the one to find the body. I walked into an old abandoned cabin in my neighborhood. I saw movement around me, and when I shined my flashlight to the walls, there were thousands of cockroaches and spiders on the walls. I noped right out of there. Just reading this made my scalp itch. Hope you didn't bring any hitchhikers home. Oh wow, didn't know I had a fuck I'm out moment, but I had a really sweet neighbor that couldn't see all that well and realized SHE was the entire reason I roach bombed my apartment before moving in. I took a look after she moved and they were everywhere, on every surface, and under the carpeting. I'm glad I don't live there anymore. As kids we would walk this 1/4-mile railway tunnel near where I grew up. There were no tracks, but it was next to 2 live tunnels, so there was a slight element of danger. That and the fact it was trespassing, I guess, and railway workmen or transport police could catch us at any moment. So as you can imagine, it was dark, real dark in the middle, but towards the end there was enough light to barely see. One day we took an old school pal down there, and after walking the length, almost at the end of the tunnel, just as it was beginning to get light, he stopped to look down a large uncovered square 3 feet by 3 feet manhole. No, he didn't fall in, but after a flash of brief confusion he took in a deep breath and screamed, then immediately started sprinting for daylight. Oh shit, fucking RRUUINNNNNN, he screams. Naturally, without question we ran, having a hard time catching him up. At the mouth of the tunnel we stopped. All out of breath. WTF. What's wrong? What did you see? We asked. His face was pure white, and shaking, barely able to speak, he said there was someone down there, looking up at me. Now this buddy was and still is a good friend of mine, but back then he was known for not being the sharpest tool in the drawer. Instantly we had an idea what just happened, but slowly we returned to open manhole. Then as the 4 of us stood around this hole looking down, sure enough, reflected in the still water about 5 feet down this feckin' hole was our 4 faces looking back up at us. My friends and I went into the Gibraltar mansion in Wilmington, Delaware. It was cool until we came across a room with an older man squatting in it. He was terrified of us and we felt pretty horrible, so we left after apologizing. Why was he squatting? To assert dominance? This is not scary, but it's interesting story. My friend was walking in the forest and found old house. When he moved some stuff, the ceiling broke and old German light machine gun fell down. Was it a place you'd expect to find a German machine gun, like Germany or Argentina? So I live in Texas by the coast, and one time while me and friends were searching for mushrooms in a cow pasture by the Gulf of Mexico, we found a WW2-era German Luger next to a cow patty, cow poop, sticking out of the dirt. It was in bad shape and kinda rusted, but we have no idea how it got there. We came up with all kinds of theories for how it got there, the most fantastic of which was a German U-boat crew actually landed on Texas soil. That's probably not true, but it was fun for a 16-year-old to think about while picking mushrooms. Exploring an abandoned prison, part of the ceiling collapsed. It didn't hit me, but it was close enough to knock me over. I guess junkies used it as a place to shoot up because I fell on an old needle. I got tested to make sure I didn't get anything from it, but it scared me enough to stay away from abandoned buildings to this day. Fuck, I hate needles. Every story I've read that has mentioned needles has not failed to make me shudder. Exploring an abandoned manor with some friends. We had been drinking and smoking and thought it would be cool. The ground floor entrances were covered with bricks, so we had to enter through the first floor, 8 feet height, using an improvised ladder made of old trash and wood pieces. It was quite unstable and hard to climb, and we were 5 or 6 people. Being the only way out, and knowing how slow it was, I was on edge the whole time. We were exploring the floor, cool glass ceiling, lots of debris, but suddenly we find a room filled with plastic containers with pink and brown liquids. Some friends decide to explore the ground floor, which was pitch black, and involved going down a broken staircase missing several steps. They heard someone coughing in the dark and feel several people moving in the darkness as their eyes get used to it. At this point I was hearing someone slowly walking in a room on the first floor, carefully stepping over the broken glass on the floor, to not make noise, which was really creepy. We got the fuck away, and on our way out we saw a roughed up man with bloodshot eyes leaving a shack outside the house and staring at us. I still shiver when I remember his look. Probably just some junkies living there, but for overly high 15-year-olds it was scary as fuck. I've been many places in the tri-state area and have experienced floors that are decaying. Once almost fell, thankfully was a very small drop, needles, animal corpses, etc. One time at a prison in NJ I saw a cell that was decked out with a decorated dollhouse, and you could tell someone was staying there. The creepiest experience I ever had was about 6 years ago. I was in an abandoned hospital in a residential part of NYC, which had been abandoned less than a decade prior to our visit. Despite this, it was not a well-known location. We went at night and were exploring the second, third, and fourth floors all without issue and in total silence. There was little to no graffiti, and everything was left: patient records and tissue samples, medicines, medical equipment. As we reached the fourth floor, we passed a random room that said "No explosive gases can be used in this room." I read the sound aloud and we immediately heard a huge thud coming from inside that exact room. My blood ran cold and I literally froze because I felt that someone in that room was making themselves known. We ran out of there and heard slamming doors as we went down all the stairs. I have not been back there since, and it's now been sold and is being renovated into a housing complex. I still wonder what would have happened if we went into the room. We found a stack of old computers in an abandoned house on the outskirts of our town. When we opened one of the computers, it was filled with nothing but LDP0RN. 3 of the guys I was with ditched because they didn't want to get involved or convicted. I just called the police and they took them. There was a good 6 to 7 terabytes. Truly disgusting people in this world. Bit more context: I was 13 when this happened and had no idea what to do or who to call. I realized that I should have called child services, some kind of child abuse hotline, or reported to the police anonymously, but I was a young kid and was never told what to do in a situation like that. All I knew that it was wrong and some kind of authority had to be called, and 9/11 was the only one I knew of. As 12-year-old kids, we were exploring the woods as kids do. The forest parted to an open field, and in the distance was an abandoned farm. Naturally we crept inside, and in one of the horse stalls were all discarded hypodermic needles and old food. Our parents were quite mad when we told them what we found. Same, but in an old warehouse by the edge of the city. We also found porn comic books, which we took home because we were 12-year-old girls seeing porn for the first time. It led to a long talk by our parents about how porn can be demeaning to women and doesn't reflect how sex should be. In retrospect, I'm glad for the talk, and glad we took the porn instead of the used needles. Wow, I can't believe I have a place to tell this story. When I was in middle school we went upstate in the summer. There was an abandoned house in the woods we explored. top floor was pretty pristine. The beds were made in drawers/closets shut with stuff neatly arranged inside. There were bats. The lower you went the more disordered. The basement/garage was in complete disarray. Books and random crap thrown around. Beer cans and used condoms. We went to the far end of the house where the wall partially collapsed, and that's when we saw the bear. Foolishly ran with all our might. Thankfully the house between us and bear's lack of interest is why I'm typing this. You must not have been his type. You walked onto the set of The Three Bears Do Goldilocks. A pornographic retelling of the classic tale. Got busted by a soldier who told me, rather calmly, that the spot was used for training with real bullets, and that I'd better get out of here before he drags my ass to the cop. The guy was really nice, took the time to explain why it was dangerous, and send me on my way. I didn't insist. Weirdest part is we explored for 1 or 2 hours before getting busted and met no one. We weren't hitting or anything. Training grounds can cover a good bit of area. It'd be very easy to miss a couple of wandering kids. I was looking around an old abandoned quarry near where they would process the rocks with a friend when we both hear something moving. He just blurts out hello, and a soft voice replies hello. We ran. What was he hoping for? I do urban exploring quite frequently, and nothing ever makes us leave instantly apart from dodgy floors or squatters. However, 5 years ago me and a few friends explored a derelict farmhouse with outbuildings which had evidently been left for decades with the state it was in. After having a look around the place and finding nothing but empty buildings, we had a look inside what appeared to be an old stable. Inside was literally hundreds of empty tins of cat food, some nooses tied to a beam, and a fairly new pair of scissors with a brownish crust covering the blades. The smell was putrid. We ventured further into the building and noticed on the flood was a cat's tail, and a few cat's paws which had been dismembered and left on the floor. We swiftly exited, and on our way out a pickup pulled up onto the side of the farm, bearing in mind it was surrounded by woods and fields with no track leading to it, with 3 men stood in the bed. Needless to say we got out of there as quick as we could and haven't seen or heard anything about it. The farm went on the market and sold earlier this year, so it would be interesting to see who previously owned it. My friends and I were exploring an abandoned military housing complex at night. It was in pretty bad shape, but there were lots of interesting things to see. We almost pissed ourselves a couple times because of mannequins behind doors and stuff. There was also a neat art installation with records hanging from the ceiling. Anyway, we climbed up some stairs to the tallest part of the building. We saw some faint light coming from under a door. Somehow the door had been booby-trapped, and as soon as my friend opened it there was a crash and a cinder block on a rope that came swinging out the open door and just missed us. I got a split-second look inside where I saw a small fire, a mattress on the ground, and then a man moving quickly toward us. He was silhouetted by the light so I couldn't make out what he looked like or what exactly he was holding, but I wasn't about to stick around to find out. I yelled run, and we bolted out of there as fast as our legs could carry us. It wasn't abandoned. Imagine some teens/adults coming in with fucking Ouija boards and cameras when you're making dinner lol. If a place looks like someone is living there, that's an instant nope. Dead crows and satanic symbols on the walls in an abandoned building on an island. That's the kind of generic shit you'd find in a cliché horror game. God, why can't Satan worshippers be original for once? SMH. Broke into an abandoned house in the village I grew up in England back when I was a teenager, maybe 15 years ago now. Was with a couple friends but broke off by myself and ventured upstairs. When I turned at the top of the stairs I saw a figure standing in the darkness just staring at me. I bolted out of the building as quickly as I could and my friends heard me and panicked. They weren't far behind. Went back there a couple of weeks later with a bigger group to prove my story, and to my embarrassment. It was a tall mirror at the top of the stairs. The figure I saw was me. Not my proudest moment. When you stare at the abyss stares at you. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.